Jason,
Yes.
Let's go. The WNBA season is officially over. On Sunday, the Chicago Sky clinched their first ever WNBA title, defeating Taurasi and the Phoenix Mercury 80-74. I'm telling you right now, as I was watching the game, the atmosphere, it was unbelievable. It felt electric in Chicago. They had a sellout crowd for Game 3 and Game 4, which, hello, women's sports, get into it. And it like, that's an amazing achievement in general for the 6th seed. But the way that they went about it, they were playing a 5 seed. So a number 5 and 6 seed were in the finals, which is pretty rare. But Chicago went 16-16 in the regular season. So, that's an up and down season. We'll get into the game, but how about the story of Candace Parker? She returned home to Chi-Town, won a championship in her first year. That's a story right there. You can't make this stuff up.
The amount of stories that are contained within this Chicago Sky team are unbelievable. Candace Parker's homecoming, Coach Wade pushing all the right buttons at the right time. The fact that we have in Vandersloot and Quigley a married couple on this team, and
Vanderquigs. You need to know they're the Vanderquigs.
The Vanderquigs, and I can't even imagine what it must feel like as Courtney Vandersloot, an incredible floor general all series and all season, to be there watching her wife absolutely go off and shoot them to the championship. That's got to be an incredible feeling. There are so many fun stories and really fascinating stories around this team. And to add on top of that it was an incredible game, a come from behind win. You mentioned it as the 6th seed, 2 single elimination games, beating the Sun, which is a thing that I don't...
Big time.
I mean, I didn't think that they were going to do that. The Sun were a dominant force.
They won a 14 straight home games, something wild like that.
So there's just an unbelievable amount of storylines just contained within this team, and it was really fantastic to watch. Add on top of that the fact that it was a thrilling and absolutely thrilling game. Just absolutely electric. So fun.
It was a thriller in Manila, definitely, and in a sense of, even down to the end. But what I loved is that, when we talk about the growth of the WNBA, who's following the WNBA, I say this because people need to hear it. Your favorite player is a fan of the WNBA. Just for people to understand, the whole Phoenix Suns team was courtside when the games were in Phoenix. I'm talking about the whole team. They had players from other teams there. Damian Lillard was courtside. Not to mention the WNBA players that are showing up in drones just to watch the finals. We're all fans of the league. And then when Chicago, it was all right, it's our turn. Chance the Rapper was on the sidelines, turned up. Reverend Jesse Jackson, Scottie Pippen, and again, the WNBA players, hashtag WNBA Twitter was out there. I saw a lot of those faces. It was a real celebration. It made me think of, in the NBA, when it's All-Star, that's an event. It's not just an All-Star game. It's an entertainment event. It's an event that people go to. The who's are there. We never really had anything like that for the WNBA, just yet. That's never really been a thing where you could expect that people are going to come to the games dressed like they're going to the club afterwards. We ain't never seen that at no WNBA games. We haven't seen to this degree. There's always been some type of following, but to this degree, we haven't really seen as many celebrities, pop culture, just all of that coming together. So for me, I was really excited about everything about this finals, even the storyline. I know Diana Taurasi and the Phoenix Mercury didn't win, but she clinched to go to the finals. Then the next day had a whole baby. Then the next day started the finals. There's a storyline there too that people were following the story. And even the villain that the Phoenix Mercury have become of the league now, I think they embrace that. But yeah. Why are you laughing, Jason?
Okay. Well, we gotta. It was absolutely important that we give the Chicago Sky their props. Clea Copper, 2021 WNBA Finals MVP, and well-deserved, was just a force all series.
Big time play.
But a lot of the talk after the game was due to the fact that the Phoenix Mercury, all I know is I'm watching the postgame. I'm watching the celebration. I've got one eye on the postgame presser room to see what the talk is going to be that emerges from there. And the next tweet I see is the Mercury have not made a statement. They won't speak to the press, and actually they're gone. They left. They were out of the arena.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate because, listen, hard feelings happen, as you know much better than I do, when you lose a finals, when you lose an important game. But to not talk to the press in this moment, the clinching game in the finals, it kind of takes away a little bit, forget whether it's classy or whatever, it steals a little bit of the moment from the champ, because now we have to talk about this. And I think that is the unfortunate part of it for me.
100%. So I was covering the WNBA finals with NBA TV. And so one of the things that we do in our post game is we cover the pressers. So we're sitting there, we're on TV now. I'm telling you, we got a post game show going on TV. And, we're covering first. And I need to mention, too, that the Phoenix Mercury team, they gave hugs to every single player while on the court. To me, that was a big show of classiness. Kahleah Copper said much respect to Diana Taurasi for she made sure that she found everyone on the team and congratulated them. So to me, that's the harder thing to do while everybody's celebrating and turned up and you just lost. That's hard to do. Sandy Brondello, she did her press conference. So we covered that and we're going about our show and we're like, oh yeah, this is so crazy, the story. And then we get to, Coach Wade, and I'm so glad you mentioned, because that needs to be talked about a lot. If people haven't heard his press conference after the game, listen to it. He talks about having to fight for people to believe his intelligence. He talks about, because of how he looks, how he might be from somewhere that people may not assume that his IQ is high enough, that he had to fight for that. He even turned his hat backwards in the press conference to say representation matters. And yes, you got a coach that wears his hat backwards. And for the kids that look like me and the little boys and little girls that look like me, we here. And so I thought that was a really dope press conference. And then we keep it moving. Kahleah Copper comes in and tries to take Coach Wade. She's like, hey, we need to get our coach and our GM in there to turn up with us in the locker room. And then they were like, yeah, Ka, actually, Coach, you can leave. Kai, you got to stay and do some media. She was like, what? And she was like, no, I want to turn up. That's another thing, when you are an MVP, you got to leave the turn up festivities and go do media. And then after she's finished, here come her teammates, and we see Candace Parker, Courtney Vandersloot, Allie Quigley. The Vanderquigs have arrived. You know what I'm saying? They're in the building, and their press conference was, as you would imagine, they went down memory lane. Allie Quigley and Candace Parker are both from that Chicago area, so that meant more to them. They go down and tell different stories. They go through the normal press conference that you would expect. So our show is just rolling. I'm like, Kristen Ledlow, friend of the show. She's been on the show. Yes. Her and Candace Parker are like best friends. So she's literally crying on air. So I'm like, Kristen, get it together. We're covering it. It was a celebration because, again, I was at Turner and that's where Candace Parker works. She works for Turner. So it was like more of a celebration too in that place because a lot of people knew Candace. So the show's going well. Kristen has stopped crying, got her makeup fixed up. And we're sitting here waiting on the press conference from the Phoenix Mercury players. And I go on Twitter because, of course, that's my newspaper. I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm starting to see things like the Phoenix Mercury have left the building.
Yeah.
And we're on air. What? So we're waiting on the presser. So I say, I talked to our producer. I'm like, hey, I think Phoenix is gone. I don't think there's going to be. So we're coming up off the break. And they're like, all right, let's do these highlights for this next segment. Then we'll find out what's going on. So basically, we're stalling time on air, waiting for the press conference that we realize now is never going to come. So I eventually had to go on air and give a statement. We had to cover the fact that there was nothing to cover. And to your point, it took a little bit away from the championship in a sense of there was a lot of chatter on Twitter about it. A lot of people were surprised about it. Even I talked about WNBA Twitter was in the building, but a lot of those people are also journalists. So a lot of people wanted those quotes, wanted to get the thoughts, the reactions. And it became a big story online. And I said exactly what you just said. Like, the most unfortunate part of it all is that some type of limelight is going to be taken away from Chicago. But because we've all, any player, I've had to face the music plenty of times. When we've lost in the tournament for college, that's a big deal. You don't want to be snotting and crying on the podium, but here we are, and it's tough because I know mental health is a big component now, and I know that that's talked about a lot, and I don't negate that, but at the end of the day too, somebody like that can handle it has to come, like somebody has to face the music. And if it's somebody that's like, look, I can't handle that right now, okay, that person can't handle it, but there needs to be like two people that just have to volunteer as tribute.
Great point, because I think with some of the conversations we've had around press conferences and athletes feeling uncomfortable in certain situations doing press, whether it be because of mental health or other toxic and issues with that particular media environment, I could see people saying, oh, well, now it's fine. Here's the thing. When we're talking about like tennis, Naomi Osaka is it. Nobody wants to hear from her coach or her hitting partner. She's the only person on the court. It's different. This is a team sport. There's a dozen people that could have come out and said anything. It would have been great to get Diana's perspective as a real peer to Candace's in terms of like their stature in the sport, and to get that perspective about what it means. The pictures of the door that that Diana shattered after the loss started emerging on social media. So clearly she was heated. At the same time, I think when they cool down, they will regret this, is my guess, because Diana's got 3 titles. One of them against Chicago. Like, it's not like this is the last chance at age 39. You're never going to get another chance. You're a 3-time champion. It's just unfortunate. Again, the feelings more than I do about how hard that must be. But then again, just like go up there and do like a Rasheed Wallace. Both teams play hard if you're that upset about it. I would say the other thing that is a little bit mystifying is it didn't seem like... Now, of course, Diana had the incident with the ref where she pushed the ref. Some critics were like, oh, suspension, a bigger fine, whatever the case may be. Taurasi said that she didn't know it was the ref in the heat of the moment. I believe her. That seemed absolutely reasonable, that she just got caught up. It didn't seem like there was anything in this finals game that was like beyond the pale, or something that was, more intense, more something that would get a team that angry that they wouldn't take the podium. Yes, there were some calls that went either way. That's always going to happen. The refs let them absolutely play intensely physically. And you could argue, and I think fairly argue, that benefited the Sky. They put Dolson back in with 5 fouls, which is an absolutely gigantic call. She then made 2 baskets that really swung the game. Her physicality, the fact that she is just like this body leaning on Brittany Griner all game, like wearing down the bigs, that was huge. But I couldn't find anything in that game that leapt out that was like, uh-oh, players are going to be so mad that they're not going to want to talk about it afterwards. Was there anything that leapt out to you that seemed like...
I know what you're missing, Jason, and it is the spice.
Yeah,
it was spicy. So there was
a lot of trash talk. Taurasi's one of the biggest trash talkers. So.
Exactly, but there was some Sophie Cunningham in there.
For
there
sure.
was some Kalia Copper in there.
For sure.
There was some Griner in there. So there was the refs that I'm sure if you ask Phoenix, you know how you're watching it from your lens, but if you ask Phoenix how they felt about the play calls, I mean, honestly, let's even reverse it. Let's rewind it a little bit. I can remember the press conference, the game before this, where Coach James Wade went on a very large rant talking about the foul disparity, how many free throws they did not get for the Chicago Sky. So then you had that happen, and then you had what happened with Diana Taurasi, the fans. There were some fans that thought that the only thing that would be the only solution was to suspend her because that's what the rules said. And then we saw that it was a $2,500 fine. So then you go into this game. So all that stuff happened before this game. The spice happened. Oh, Sophie Cunningham on her Instagram story, somebody had said something about she was snatching ankles, the ankle shaker. She reposted it with the crying emojis. I'm sure that didn't sit well with some of the Chicago.
Kalia gave her the look. At one point.
So the ultimate meme that we have all seen is where Kalia Copper is looking Sophie Cunningham dead in the face, talking about do you want some problems? Because I am called problem in my pastime. So that's what happened. So there was all of this energy. So that's what I mean by the spiciness. There was all of that going into game 4, and I couldn't wait. I was tweeting about, I can't wait for this game. I hope that there's barking. Even Skylar Diggins, they asked her during the interview during the game, and she was like, shouts to Roz Goldon Woode. She was like, there's a lot of talking, and Skylar was like, yeah, this is a game 4 in the finals. That's what it's supposed to be like. What y'all expect? Like, she basically said the water is wet news, but yes, there's some energy here. We're trying to win a championship. This is an elimination game. Having said all of that, imagine Phoenix feeling like the fans was already trying to get Diana out of the game, feeling like they weren't getting any calls because the Coach Wade was complaining. They're probably thinking that it was probably like Phoenix Mercury versus everybody, those shirts. They probably really felt like that. So when they lost the game and in the manner they lost, that it was close, and they probably felt like there were many, many, many calls that didn't go their way. That's how doors get bust wide open. And that's how probably, I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm just saying that's probably how their mindset was, in a sense of, man, we're out of here. Everybody already wanted to kind of get us out of here. Well, we out then. You don't like us, we out. Like, that's probably, look, no one told me that. I didn't hear that from any players. This is complete speculation, but that's kind of what I'm probably thinking that was the energy behind it.
Well, listen, it was an unbelievable game. Really an unbelievable game. Congrats to the Sky. What a fantastic season. What a wrap to the season, and onward and upward from here. Renee, after the slew of leaked emails showing various misogynistic, racist, and homophobic language from the now former coach of the Raiders, Jon Gruden, the NFL has decided that no more emails will be leaked and in any way released. And of course, if you're worried if there is similar kinds of language from Gruden or from anybody else within that tranche of 650,000 emails, there's none. Don't worry. The NFL's looked into it. We can take their word for it. That's absolutely fine. These emails that were reviewed during the investigation into sexual misconduct by the Washington football team are now officially clean, according to the NFL. It appears only one NFL employee suffered any real consequences here, and it was a coach for a completely different team. Jon Gruden, you have been offered up as blood sacrifice. So what do we think about the NFL saying, that's it, no further emails? And do we...
I mean, I was wondering if he was going to laugh. Jason, you got through that so good. I couldn't help but to laugh. It's a joke.
I've pulled some all-nighters in my life as a student, read books in an evening, but 650,000 emails in like 2 days is a lot of reading. Do we believe them? And what do we think?
Jason, I couldn't help but to laugh at the joke you just presented at my footstep, in a sense of course, that's not the truth. You mean to tell me that the group that was actually getting investigated, that is just done? Like the whole point of that, and there's so much going on with that investigation that I'm confused to how that's done. I just was made privy of all the different things going on with that investigation. So for them, and I don't want people to miss the point. The point is that, yes, Jon Gruden should be gone. For those emails, the racist, misogynistic, homophobic emails, he should be gone. But then who are we serving up next in a sense of, I don't believe that the team that you were actually investigating, are you telling me that nothing came from the investigation other than Jon Gruden?
Well, that's the other, so Jon Gruden was sending emails and was anybody responding to them? Was anybody, what was the thread?
Was
anybody writing
red?
back?
Like, I find it hard to believe that Jon Gruden was left on reds, like, with me. Like, I tell people they don't have to be like this, but this happens. I don't cuss. So sometimes, like, when people know that I don't cuss, and when they cuss around me, they're like, oh, my bad, sis, my bad. I know you don't cuss. And I'm like, nah, you good. Like, it's whatever. But it's almost like that energy where you're not going to say certain things to certain people. So for him to be blasting off these emails, and I mean, these emails are wild and unacceptable. Who is he comfortable saying these things to? Like, who is the welcoming, like, receiver of these words? Because he wouldn't say that to people that he knows would go off or ring the alarm. Who is he talking to?
That's a great point, because this is an entree into, Gruden and other people around the NFL who are in positions of power and the way they speak. And I think the thing that is not, it's like, we say this, I feel like, so many times on this podcast, but it's like, none of this is really a surprise. Nobody's like, oh my God, I can't believe it.
No one's shocked.
That's not a surprise. What is, I think, disappointing is, one, that there are people who are surprised, who are legitimately like, what? I can't believe it. And who would go out and actually say, well, so people can't, speak freely on it. I'm sure if I look through your emails from 10 years ago, I'd find something. It's like, listen, feel free to look through my emails. There's definitely nothing
Every
of
time
that
somebody
level.
says that, we don't
it's
have
like, what
that
are you
stuff in
saying?
our emails.
Yeah, what are you talking about? It's not on work emails with professional people. And then, the other thing that I think is really, again, not surprising, but just disappointing in that this is how the real world works is, on the one hand, you have any number of public pronouncements from the NFL, from NFL PR, about Michael Sam or Colin Kaepernick or whoever the case may be, right? At various hot button social issues, and through official channels, the NFL and people around the NFL are like, we embrace diversity. It's important. We know we have, we care about these issues, yada, yada, yada. Behind closed doors, people could not be more dismissive. And these are the same folks. So, that's the part about it that is distressing, because I think as a person of color in this industry, I'm used to the idea that people are probably saying stuff that I don't like in other rooms that I'm not in. And I just kind of hope that energy doesn't infect the stuff that I'm trying to do in the real world, but we all know it does. And then the problem is when you complain about it, when you say, yeah, but look at the stuff that people are saying, or, look at this evidence, then all of a sudden you're the person is causing distractions, is causing problems, and yada, yada,
then
yada.
You're the problem on the team. No longer the fact that you're the one that's actually having to almost take up for yourself.
Yes.
Then you become the distraction and become the problem. And in turn, Colin Kaepernick has not been on a team since. I'm just like, I know people don't like to take those type of measures, but when you have the talk that's being talked, the influence that's being influenced, the just sheer energy behind, like, for you to say, you didn't mean any harm. You chose violence in the way that you talked. Like, how people say, like, words could be swords and words could be weapons. Well, the way that those emails appeared, he was literally using his words as like swords, weapons, the way he was talking about people, the way he was describing people. So for me, it's just hard because I'm all for if somebody gives an apology, if somebody really comes to their senses, I'm all for understanding what they're saying. And, sometimes it does take the whole world telling you you've gone crazy, this is unacceptable. And then sometimes people do really, like, a light bulb goes off. I can understand when people want to change and do better, but when you say that, I didn't mean any harm and there's not a racist bone in my body, and then we go on to see the things that you said and how you said them, it's hard for me to believe.
One of the descriptions of these offending emails that Jon Gruden sent really bumped me. So apparently Gruden, in these various emails with Allen and other men, had included, one of the emails had attached photos of women wearing only bikini bottoms and one photo of Washington team cheerleaders. Now, of course, these emails have been disgorged as part of the investigation into Washington football team regarding the various abuses that took place with their cheerleading team. Okay, so that investigation, and part of the allegations that the various former members of that cheerleading team have put forth, regard photos taken and trips taken that they felt they could not opt out of. They felt in some form or fashion coerced into doing it, even though it was never explicit, like you have to do this. They felt pressured into taking these trips. One of them was to Costa Rica, where they took topless shots. And another was the discovery that circulating amongst various people within the team was a compilation video of outtakes from various photo shoots that contained material that certainly the women were not aware of, and certainly were not aware that it was being traded and passed around. So regarding this photo, do these women know that this photo exists? Where did this photo come from? Like, I have a lot of questions that I don't know if we're going to get the answer to it. Like, is this evidence as part of a criminal investigation, this photo? Like, potentially, we just don't know. And it is a thing that I think it's important to think about. It should be. Because, one, we need to know more about that. And two, it's important to reconnect with just how troubling that case is and the allegations that are contained in there.
I think that's why everyone is still like, when the NFL, that's why I was laughing in your intro, because the NFL is trying to get us to kind of be like, all right, guys, show's over. We got the bad guy. We got Jon Gruden out of here. It's over. The one bad guy in the NFL is now gone. And that's the problem that I think all of us are having, because there was an investigation for a reason. These are women that are attached to these. Sometimes when these things happen, it's like the human doesn't get attached to the problem. There are women who are still out there that know now that their videos that they didn't want to take in the first place are being circulated all throughout the company. We don't know how many people have been sent that video. We don't know how many videos there are. That's unsettling. And so to hear the NFL say, all right, guys, we're done. Everything's done here. Nothing else to see. It's like, but wait. We understand Jon Gruden had to go, but what about the real reason you started it? So that's the troubling part about the whole thing.
I will say it's important to always remember that whatever sports league we're talking about, the commissioner works for the owners. That's the W, that's the NBA, that's the NFL, that's whatever. The owners selected Roger Goodell to represent them and their interests as a league. And listen, I think that it is something worth notice that thus far in this investigation and these in the kind of knock-on effects from these emails into the investigation as part of the investigation in the Washington football team, that the person who has now taken the fall is a coach of a team not associated with the Washington football team, not an owner. No owners or executives have thus far felt any impacts from this. So, and I'm not saying that Jon Gruden should not take the fall, but it's interesting that we're stopping it now. We're just like, okay, turn off the faucet now that we've got this person who, by the way, was a coach, not an owner, not an exec, and not involved in this particular football team.
Look, we get it. We're not dumb. The NFL doesn't want to keep hammering home the stereotypes that we associate with the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes that people think of when they think of the NFL. They think of racist. They think of homophobic. We think of all the things that Jon Gruden represented in his emails. That's literally, to your point, no one was shocked. No shocker alert here. We're not surprised. But the surprising part to me right now is that if the NFL thinks that we believe that of 650,000 emails, that Jon Gruden is the only guy emailing himself and emailing himself back and then emailing himself and BCCing and replying to himself, you got to be kidding me if you think that we believe that's where it stops. So that's where the NFL needs to do better. We know that they're out of those 650K emails. Jon Gruden wasn't emailing himself. There was people he felt comfortable sending them videos. Felt like there's people there that there was a comfortability that the Washington football team felt to pass around. There was something there. And so it's not over. I know that it probably is over because if the NFL is basically saying, we're not going to give you nothing else to incriminate ourselves, then it is over. But for us, it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
Well, we are approaching December 2021, which will make it a shocking 10 years since the last NBA lockout, the work stoppage that I think you could fairly say altered the landscape of the NBA and has given rise to a lot of the things that we're seeing now within that sport. A new commissioner, Adam Silver, a large momentum swing in the power of star players. We are delighted to be joined today by senior writer for Sports Illustrated and co-host of the crossover pod, Howard Beck, who covered the lockout extensively then for the New York Times and who followed my Twitter account during that time. And I would say, and Howard would say, and has said, is responsible for my career now. I would not have a career if it wasn't for Howard Beck.
Hear this. Let me in on the joke.
Who promoted my Twitter account during the lockout and then has later taken full credit for my career, and I give him that credit. Howard, thank you for joining Takeline.
Thank you for that wonderful intro. Thank you for having me. Wonderful to see you, and wonderful to see you, Renee, as well. Yes, I mean, listen. First of all, congratulations on not being a corgi, Jason.
That's right. I was an anonymous dog avatar at that time.
You were just a corgi avatar, and until you actually revealed yourself, your identity by both name and face, there was a very big part of me that just thought it's just the corgi. It's a really damn cute corgi and a funny as hell corgi. So props to the corgi. But dude, you were killing us. We're sitting, me and Ken Berger and Alan Hahn and all kinds of folks, Brian Mahoney, the rogues gallery of NBA reporters. We're sitting in these freezing ass hotel lobbies covering the lockout, or we're on sidewalks. It's 2 a.m. It's 3 a.m. We're just punch drunk. We're drunk on bad pizza and all this other stuff. And out of the blue, there's this guy, this corgi, funniest fucking NBA jokes, like just crazy ass twisted shit at David Stern's expense or Adam Silver's expense or like who knows, like Dan Gilbert's expense. Somebody. There were just like this constant barrage of one-liners and weird observations and just funny shit. And it was keeping us sane. I mean, maybe it was making us more insane. I don't know. It was one or the other. But it kept me entertained. And it was like it would be the middle of the night. You feel like you're all alone. There's a handful of us who are there for the worst of these, the longest of them. And Twitter, this is 10 years ago. Twitter was a different place 10 years ago.
Definitely.
And so just getting any feedback at all that people cared about the lockout, that we were ruining our personal lives to cover was great. And so, yes, I immediately started following you. I retweeted you like crazy, and your career took off from there. You're welcome.
Wow.
Thank you very much, Howard. The check is in the mail. The check is in the mail. Okay, so it's been 10 years. Take us through quickly the lockout, the kind of issues that led to it, and then we can talk about like where we are as looking at the NBA landscape now.
What led to it, was up for much debate then, and it probably still would be. That people will relitigate the living crap out of this, I'm sure. If you believe the NBA, it was like 27 out of 30 teams or some crazy number were losing money.
Okay.
So there you go.
I don't believe that to this day, but that's fine.
Hundreds of millions they were reportedly losing. And so what they wanted was to kind of rebalance things. At that time, players were making 57% of what we call BRI, basketball related income. And the owners wanted to ratchet that down, because 57% was breaking certain franchises. By the way, I believe, especially then, because we were coming out of an economic crisis then, if you recall, there were a lot of teams, or a significant number, maybe not half the league, but there were a significant number in smaller markets that were certainly having a trouble, especially with that 57%, because 57% means more or less every single team is somewhere in that vicinity. It's actually an aggregate number. It's league wide, but it's easier for the Knicks and the Lakers to absorb that than it is for the Indiana Pacers. So the league was like all about rebalancing this. And they were also making their first real inroads, I think at that time, toward major revenue sharing to try to help the smaller markets with extra input from the bigger markets. But what had also happened, of course, the year before that was this guy, LeBron, left Cleveland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might have heard about the story. It was kind of a big deal at the time.
Yeah. This decision thing with a capital D. So LeBron conspires, some would say, to go to Miami with Bosh and Dwayne Wade, who was already there, to form the super team. And it freaked the crap out of the owners. Certainly Mickey Arison, the owner of the Miami Heat, and many others. And so they also, I think, were trying on the money aside, on the just mechanics of how the league operated, the CBA, the salary cap. They wanted to try to stem that tide. Hasn't worked out so well looking back. But those were some of the things that were animating the lockout.
So I'm curious because during that lockout, you talked about the owner's point of view. That's the same thing we heard in the WNBA, and we still hear it right now. So you saying that, it's like, and I'm on the other side of things now. So this is interesting because when the NBA lockout happened, I was year 2 in the WNBA, eyes wide open, like excited. And now from another position, do you and not to hijack it, but is that a normal thing in a sense of, will we ever know if it was the truth or not? Because you said what they thought, so it's never been, has it ever been confirmed?
Confirmation's a hard thing to come by, Renee. I mean, as I'm sure you're aware now too, right? Your Players Association and the National Basketball Players Association for the guys in the NBA. A lot of common people, I think, work, some work for both. There's some overlap, I believe. And certainly sharing of information. The leagues, and of course the WNBA run by the NBA, the leagues are all going to have this ability to claim to us in the public, we are losing X amount, or this is where the system is broken. And they can put out the numbers, and they can put out some maybe slight breakdown, generally speaking, that makes it look plausible. And we will always look at it with a bit of a jaded view because we're not going to see the books. We can't. Right. Now, Renee, your union can see the books. The NBA Players Union, those guys, they're lawyers and economists, can see the books. And the league's response, their defense, when people tried to cast any doubt on these reported figures, would say, the union has seen our books. Our books are open. They've seen it all. And then the union would come back with, yeah, but you don't include depreciation on the team and the building and this and that. And you can hide stuff. And there's all this, chicanery going on. And as a reporter covering it all, all right, first of all, didn't major in economics. I was an English major. Very useful. And I can't see the books, and I wouldn't understand the damn books if I saw them. So, short answer to your question, Renee, no, we'll never know for sure. And it's also in the union's interest, I should say, as long as I'm being cynical, which is my job, it's the union, the league is always going to say we're losing this money. The union, it's always going to be in their interest for public relations purposes to say, well, sure, they show us the books, but we don't believe it because of X, Y, Z. And so we still think that they're exaggerating their losses. The bottom line is, as just one piece of this with the resolution, right? They went from 57% of BRI going to the players down to this basically 50-50 split. Players' salaries in the last 10 years have exploded, as we all know. So one point that the league made that mathematically was true was, if we do this, you'll be earning a smaller percentage of the pie, but you'll be making a lot more money. It's a smaller percentage of a much bigger pie. And in fact, I think league revenues were $4 billion back then. Adam Silver on a conference call just before we started taping this said that league revenues are going to be $10 billion this season. Woo! And so the players are making 50% of $10 billion instead of 57% of $4 billion. So everyone's done okay.
Yeah, I'd say not bad. Wow.
It's hard to escape the conclusion when looking at all of this and all the things that have happened in the 10 years since, that for every reform that comes out of labor and league negotiations or tweaking with the CBA or whatever the case may be, the effects of, signing a new TV deal, changes to contract lengths, etc., that all of these tweaks come with a bevy of unforeseen consequences that almost make the original reason for doing the thing moot. I think, you mentioned it. The original idea was we got to rein in costs. Players are making too much of the pie. And yet now we are in a situation in which players make a ton of money. They do it on shorter contracts now. So there's more player movement than ever. And then, one of the solutions to the issues of players fleeing the teams that drafted them was this Supermax, which now it's debatable whether that holds anybody down at all anymore. People will sign it and then with the full understanding they can just leave anyway if they really wanted to. So have we ever actually fixed anything with in the NBA? It just feels like every solution creates more problems.
Are you saying more money, more problems?
Yeah, I am saying that.
Accurate. That could be one title of the history of the NBA, modern labor conflicts, more money, more problems. The other one could be like, David Stern's jumbo book of unintended consequences or something. Like that would have been that'd be a great name for the NBA's, like rename the CBA. CBA is a very boring name. The jumbo book of unintended consequences is much more interesting.
Okay. Yeah. We'll remember that one.
No, but it's true. What Jason said is absolutely true. The league is constantly trying to tweak something to accomplish some particular purpose. More team stability, more parity or competitive balance across the league, and every single time it backfires or creates these unintended consequences. And I think often unforeseen. I think the most dramatic is one that we don't spend a lot of time talking about, but it's just so obvious now. In 1999, the first lockout, which I also covered, that one was the first time that they instituted the 1998-99 season, so the 98 lockout. That one is what resulted in the max contract. Well, the max contract's unintended consequence is if you've got one superstar, you can now afford to throw another 2 or 3 under your salary cap because they can't make their actual market value. So there's one that's as old as the max contract itself, 20-something years. We've had this unintended consequence of max salaries so that you wouldn't have a bunch of guys who, maybe aren't really worth it or demanding 20 million, 30 million, 40 million. All right, great. Now they're capped, but now teams can collect more superstars under one salary cap and you have super teams. So that flies in the face of the NBA's stated goal of competitive balance. Part of the problem is just that guys are making so much money now that they can afford to take risks that their predecessors would not have. So Larry Bird, we talk about bird rights all the time, right? They created bird rights in the mid-'80s so that the Celtics could keep Larry Bird, for instance, and so that you could always go over the cap. We call it a soft cap. So you could keep your own guys because, hey, you drafted them, you developed them, they're your star, you should be able to. And that was really persuasive. For decades, stars almost never left in free agency. Part of that was just the times did not allow for it, right? Like LeBron broke that barrier, and that's why guys feel freer to do it now. But back then, it just wasn't done, in part because of convention or quaint notions of loyalty or whatever, but in part because bird rights meant you could make a lot more if you stayed put. Well, now you'll still make a lot more if you stayed put, but it's the difference between like 170 million or 200 million. So the 30 million you're quote unquote leaving on the table, you're still stupid rich. So that has emboldened guys to make the kinds of decisions that their predecessors, other all-stars, would not have made, because back then the sacrifice you would make by denying your own bird rights, by leaving that behind and choosing another team, was actually a significant loss to your bank account that would affect you for years.
Well, you talk about the soft cap, and it made me think of something, because there's a lot of talk about the hard cap right now and it becoming a reality. So knowing what we know in the history, what do you think? Is it a real possibility that the hard cap becomes a reality?
I've been covering the league since 97. I don't know how many CBAs in that time, 2 lockouts and multiple CBAs. Every single negotiation starts with like this stack of stuff that like the league lawyers throw on the table. And like hard cap is like the first thing at the top. And then the union throws a fit and says, we're never doing that. It's a blood issue. It's this, that, all right, fine. Not the hard cap, but we'd really like a much stiffer luxury tax. And we want to start creating things like the apron and multiple mid-level exceptions, and one for the taxpayer teams and one for the non-tax. So they created in the last coming out of that lockout in 2011, they did create what's kind of a virtual hard cap, which is that if you have acquired a player in a sign and trade, or if you have used the full mid-level exception, I hope I'm remembering all my. Yeah. So you do those things, you are now hard capped at a number that is above the actual cap. So there is a pseudo hard cap if you opt for certain features of the CBA in a given year. What the league really would love is to just say hard cap, period. No cap exceptions, eliminate all that stuff. Every team gets 120 or whatever to spend. And look, I think there are some good competitive virtues to that. I could make the case for why the hard cap is a good idea. It's not great for players. It's certainly anti-capitalist and all that stuff. But from a league competitive balance standpoint, it has a lot of appeal, I think. But no, the next CBA within the next couple of years, the league's going to come in. That's going to be on the front sheet again. The union's going to howl and chortle and whatever, and maybe stomp out of the room, and then they'll throw it away and they'll bring it back 5 years after that.
Howard, have you remembered the CBA? Like, do you know it by heart? The way that you just recited, right? Like, that was pretty wild, the way you just recited. Like, do you know the CBA pretty much by heart?
No, I am no Larry Kuhn or
yeah.
Shout out to Larry Kuhn, the OG of salary cap, self-made cap experts. Larry's so good at this stuff that teams would call him for advice back before every team had its own like army of like cap experts. So thank you, Renee. I appreciate that. I am nowhere near that level. There's a lot of stuff that's just gotten jammed into my skull over the last 24 years of covering this league. And some of it's actually stuck.
Regarding the hard cap, one thing that has changed since the last lockout is a movement of real money into NBA ownership, venture capital money. With that kind of like new financial firepower and new blood in ownership, is there a world in which the owners would say, we'll lock out for it? We will lock out for hard cap. We'll do it. We'll go to the mattresses.
Because they know they can ride it out as a bunch of like billionaires. I don't know what the head count is on billionaires among the 30 ownership groups now, but it's high.
Wow.
Like this was once a mom and pop operation. Like every team was like family owned, and you had Abe Pollin, and you had the buses, and that's not it anymore. It's a lot of hedge fund guys and VC guys and billionaires. Yeah, they could afford to shut down for a year. They'd be fine. I think the flip side of that is that players, because of the aforementioned riches that are now flowing into the league, there used to be a time when they would like, we got to create a strike fund, a lockout fund, just in case, so that the minimum salary guys can be supported through the months of no paychecks. Well, if it happened now, sure, the owners have no problem whatsoever writing it out. They might ruin the damn league, but they'd have no problem writing it out as individuals. The players are actually much better armed now than they've ever been too, because the average NBA salary is like $8-9 million a year. Now, not everybody's making that, but there's a lot. I'd have to look up. This is the part where I don't have memorized, but whatever the minimum salary is now, like the minimum used to be, if you were a undrafted rookie, the minimum was like a couple 100,000, 300,000. I think that minimum's probably somewhere up in like 600,000-700,000 range now. Probably. Don't quote me.
Yeah.
So, guys could sit out a season if they had to. So I don't know that particular threat would fly anymore.
Mm.
It's interesting because you were talking about the minimum used to be, and obviously with the WNBA, the maximum for us is 220. But talking about the mom and pop of it all, has the NBA, you said something that was interesting. Like, yeah, the owners are pretty much all billionaires, but there's a lot of millionaire athletes too. How do you think player empowerment has affected the league in general, because you see now where players, they don't really care about, like, they're going to do what they want to do, whether the rules apply or not. Like, players will be like, I don't care, I'm leaving. So what do you think about, like, just the player empowerment that is here now in today's game?
It's completely changed the NBA. It just has. If you took, and I haven't done the head count recently on this one, but the last 10 years of movement by players who were, say, all-star or all-NBA or all, maybe even all defensive team, whatever metric you want to use for that, players at the top level, there's been more of that movement in the last 10 years than any previous decade, easily. And maybe all those decades combined, frankly. And it's multiple times too, right? LeBron didn't just leave Cleveland for Miami.
Yeah.
He left Miami to go back to Cleveland.
Yeah.
And he left Cleveland to go to LA. And, Kawhi has jumped and Durant has jumped. I've noted this before, like, of the most recent, the guys who dominated not only championships, but regular season MVPs over the last 10 years, LeBron's moved multiple times. Kawhi's moved multiple times. One was a trade demand that ended up, or a threat to leave anyway, that ended up getting him traded to Toronto, of course. Durant has left multiple times. Like, these are the guys who account for like a majority of MVP trophies and finals MVPs and championships over the last 10 years. Like, Steph is the only one of that group that stayed put at that level. So, and look, what are we talking about going into the season? Where's Ben Simmons going to go?
Yeah.
How many games in a row do the Blazers have to lose before Dame finally says, yo, my turn?
Yeah.
How many games do the Wizards have to lose before Bradley Beal says, yo, my turn? This is the league has changed irrevocably due to player empowerment and shorter contracts that give the players all the leverage in the world. And I should note, it's the league that wanted these shorter contracts. They ratcheted from, it used to be.
Exactly. See, there we go again. They've done it again. Exactly what I was saying. Every time they come up with a solution to a thing, it ends up being the thing that creates more of the issue that they were originally trying to avoid every single time. Every time, Howard.
Every time. When they created the 98-99 CBA out of that lockout, they created for the first time maximum. I think that was the first time they had maximum number of years. So it was 7 for bird free agents and 6 for others. The next CBA, it went from 7 and 6 to 6 and 5. Then they went to 5 and 4, which is where we're at now. So most guys in the league are on 4-year deals at most. And players are making so much that they can actually choose to go short also, which means that they always have the threat of the ticking clock.
Yep.
Like, if you don't trade me, I'm going to walk away for nothing. You're going to look like a jackass. So.
Howard, one last question, very quickly, infamously, and the comment associated with the lockout that made my eyebrows arch the highest was David Stern's reported comment that he knew where the bodies were buried. Rest in peace, David Stern. So what did he mean by that? And what was the context for that?
Oh, rest in peace, David Stern. I miss him. God, what was the context for that? I believe that was in the midst. That was one of those reported comments that he made across the negotiating table when he was like maybe pointing fingers and threatening and doing his best David Stern badass. Like he would get in these, like, I've seen this, by the way, whether it's in negotiations, which of course we were not in the room for, or whether it's in person when I ran afoul of David a couple of times. Man, he could go gangsta pretty quick. And so
I like that though.
That one, I think what he was saying to the union at that time was probably like, don't push me on this stuff or test me or question me on this. I've been around longer than any of you. And, I know I assume those were figurative buried bodies.
That's what I was assuming the whole time too. So let me know.
Who knows? Remember, in the wake of the lockout, Billy Hunter also got found out for all the crap he was pulling and embezzling. We
don't have time for that. That is a whole other side.
Maybe that's what David meant. Maybe he knew about all Billy's shenanigans.
That is a whole other thing. He's Howard Beck of Sports Illustrated. Check out his podcast, The Crossover, Howard. It was so delightful to have you on. Best of luck in your coverage. The season gets underway
Howard,
this
thank
week.
you for discovering Jason, because now I'm sitting here. He's the host of Takeline. So thank you, Howard, for doing what you do, being the ultimate journalist.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Jason. Again, you're welcome. I'm happy to have provided you with this great career, which, by the way, you have paid it back in beyond proportionally, because I have enjoyed the hell out of all of your work over the years and your podcasts. I listened to every single Game of Thrones binge mode, so and everything since. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm delighted to hear that. I'm canceling the check that I formerly was going to mail now that I've been absolved of that. Howard, thank you so much.